Hi, I'm Charles, and this is Shelly, and we've collaborated on these slide presentations, and you can tell which slides are mine because they are ugly, and Shelly's are the ones that are beautiful. So we're starting with a slide that, actually, we both made this slide, so it's got elements of pretty to it. I like text a lot, and I like MOOs. Does anyone here remember what a MOO is? We've got a handful of people. Okay, people my age read Snow Crash, and they thought, oh my God, that's amazing. I want to live in that failed state. So we all started, well, not all of us, but some of us got really into like virtual reality platforms, but there weren't polygons in those eras. We did it in text. And I'm going to say more about that in a few minutes. But this is not a nostalgia project. This is a very serious and important step on doing virtual reality in a way that is low carbon. Okay, that is the motivation. Fewer polygons and a better VR than, I mean, I can't even make a nice slide, but I can write a paragraph, right? So the ability to be able to write a description is for some people more accessible than the ability to create a scene in 3D. This is a text and sound because Super Collider is a sound-based language, which is language I've used to write it. And the reason I've used to write it is because it's a platform that is often used for something called live coding, which Shelly is going to tell us about.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I thought I should probably give a little bit of context around why we got to this slightly odd project, because if you don't have the sort of backstory of many layers of why this happened, it might seem a bit weird. So I thought I'd start by telling you what live coding is. Does anybody already know what live coding is? Hey, a few people in the room. Oh, quite a lot of people in the room. Okay, maybe my slides are totally redundant then, in which case maybe I'll go through them quite quickly. But yeah, Charles and I are both part of a community who do live coding. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to say what live coding is because live coders, true to form, don't really like defining things. But it's a practice that's about making music, video, maybe other types of media, where we go on stage and write our code in front of people as a type of improvised performance, which is sometimes a bit of a crazy thing to do. Yeah, just to give you a very quick snippet of some very collaborative live coding, because we're all about collaboration. This is a performance with 5 performers at the same time doing live coding. Move on before we run out of time. But one of the things you might be able to tell from that like slightly chaotic performance involving many people is that there's live coding isn't like really a genre or a specific way of doing things, and it's also not particularly connected to one type of software. So there's like lots and lots of different types of software that people use to do live coding. The one that we're going to talk the most about, and there's a website where you can sort of see some of these things. And you might choose like a different software depending on what you're doing. I guess like any type of software development, like Super Collider is really good at making like weird noises, and Tidal Cycles is really good at making beats, but they're maybe not so good at doing the other thing. So the one that we're going to talk the most about today is Super Collider, which is probably like one of the oldest languages for live coding. So it's had a library since around 2009 for doing this. And it's also sort of fundamentally set up for doing networked computing, which is one of the reasons that it's really good for the project that we're doing. So why are we doing this sort of crazy thing called live coding? Which is like kind of a totally valid question given how error-prone coding is. can't even say it, is why you would choose to write code in front of a room full of people who are watching you. I guess fundamentally we're doing it because it's fun, but I think also live coders are really interested in what happens when you put a human in the live feedback loop with an algorithmic system. And that's sort of bringing forward sort of the human side of computing and exploring that kind of messiness that happens when we're doing coding. But also, like, we really like community. So live coders put on dance music parties, which are called algoraves, which is where we live code dance music and visuals together, which are quite often like a bit of a fun community get-together where we do stuff, do coding, and dance together. I think like doing stuff together is kind of one of the fundamental things that I find really interesting about live coding. So we sort of organize ourselves in various different ways. So we have top lab nodes, which are sort of local communities of live coders who get together and do stuff. Some of those things are algoraves. We're really interested in, one of the things we always do is project our code. So the audience can see when we're messing things up and things are going wrong. So we're sort of like living through failure and being together in sort of the errors of coding. But because live coding is a really international community, one of the things we thought about a lot is like how we do stuff together, but further away. We do stay in touch through various online channels, and some of these are sort of like online communities who have sort of come together through, I guess, being online. So for example, the Live Codera community is a community of women, non-binary and trans live coders who are very far apart. So we sort of exist on an online-only space. We've also been doing live stream parties since around 2007 through a platform called Euler Room. It used to be on YouTube, but it's sort of migrated to its own platform now. And I think the most recent one of these went on for about 3 days and had about 200 performances. And it has this like really active sort of like live chatting thing where people are sort of commenting on what's going on and sort of getting engaged in the performance through that way. And we also have some sort of collaborative web platforms that let people code music and visuals together. So the one in the background here is called Flock, and you can see all these different code blocks or a different person who's coding some sort of visuals or music. And there's various groups that have formed around this. So Pasta Gang is sort of a recent one that's sort of like not even an ensemble or a music group entirely, but just sort of like a live jamming thing that happens that anyone can join. And I think one of the things that's sort of most important to where we've got to with this is during the pandemic, there was a lot of interest around Mozilla hubs. And so live coders got really interested in that as well. So we organized some algoraves that happened in Mozilla hubs. So this is like a screenshot from one of them. So this was a space called the Cyber Yacht. I guess people were kind of like feeling like they needed like a bit more of the presence that they got from the sort of in-person algoraves than you can get through a live streaming platform. So people were joining with custom avatars, you can sort of chat, and then there would be these sort of like live stages which had these like screens which were essentially like projecting live streamed performances. So it was all like very live. And so this could be accessed through the browser or through a VR headset or however you happen to do. I think Les is going to carry on now.
It was really hard to find a picture inside the Cyber Yacht, actually, because the streams that we saved are actually the ones that were being projected into the thing, and no one thought to record the weirdness of being in the space. And like, this is just if you go find this thing on Instagram, all these characters are moving around, and the person who's done the little recording is bobbing their head up and down, so the whole thing, you get a little bit seasick. So obviously a yacht. Mozilla Hubs was great. Who here liked Mozilla Hubs? Okay, not very popular. Mozilla loves chasing whatever the hot new thing is, so now they're on to, God, I don't even remember what the AI or whatever. But for a while, when we were all going to move on to the metaverse, they made their metaverse thing. And like their side quests sometimes are, it was incredibly cool. But as soon as the the metaverse wasn't going to happen. They spun it off to its own foundation, or I don't know what's going on with it. There's no longer free hosting, and that was kind of the death of the community. It's because spinning this up yourself is not something I want to learn how to do, and apparently no one else does either. I think also, interestingly, the cyber yacht was a thing that was used over and over and over again, so people weren't recreating new spaces for new parties. They were just reusing the same one. And this was popular with live coders, but there was actually a giant underground sort of rave scene happening in Mozilla hubs and different sort of virtual nightclubs, which I think is really interesting and very little documentation of. But my introduction to VR, as we said earlier, is MOOs. Now, they were invented in 1990 by Pavel Curtis, who specifically described it as a text-based virtual reality. So reviewer number 2, if you're in the audience, it is a virtual reality, according to the guy who invented it. He didn't come up with this by himself. Does anyone remember MUDs? Yeah, you log in, and there's like monsters trying to kill you, and you're going on quests and blah, blah, blah. The difference between a MOO and a MUD is not very much, to be honest, but MOOs are object-oriented, and they're really, really designed around the idea that your character is going to want to make things that can interact with. So everyone on the MOO, if they've been there a while, starts being a builder. Or if they're not a builder, they're friends with builders. So people who are in a MOO environment are really building it out. If you were going to have an algo rave in a MOO, which would be a good idea, you might want to create a special venue for it. So the idea that like someone would come along and not reuse the space but make a new space is very much part of MOOs. So it has this ability to be very creative just through the medium of text. Now, I want to acknowledge here that this is not just through the medium of text, because like not everyone is fluent in English, some people have trouble. So there is an accessibility barrier there. But I think that for most people, it's easier to write a paragraph describing a club than to actually go and create a 3D rendering of it. And if that weren't true, people wouldn't be doing stuff in AIs, right? So like in this case, you just share your prompt and everyone imagines it's for you. The AI is in our minds. This also requires much less graphic throughput than the VR thing. So like, you know, if Daniel writes in a pose, Daniel is dancing, then we all imagine, yeah, there he goes. But we don't need to deal with like having to animate his avatar and blah, blah, blah. So like really the reason we like novels, right, is because we're able to like create the scene. So we're not missing anything. We're not missing anything. It's just different. So this is written in Super Collider, and a Super Collider is an object-oriented language written for music. It's actually sort of 3 things packaged together. You get a nice IDE with some graphics languages. You get sclang, which is the language that you can use to control sound, and you get a synthesis server. This is very much like if you're doing network-based music with Super Collider, it's not a client-server model in the same way that we might think of it, where there's a central server and you're doing it. So if Shelley and I are making music with each other on Super Collider, we are messaging each other, but we're not messaging a central thing, which gets to an issue of a major architectural difference between a Super Collider and a MOO, which is usually considered a network service. So the way that Lambda MOO, which is the one written by Curtis, works is you connect to the server and you send it text and things happen and it sends you text back. That is not what is happening with the MOO in Super Collider. There is a server, but it's just facilitating message passing. So what happens when one of us joins or either of us joins is we have all of the files that describe all of the objects, and we get that as a static file. So we have a snapshot of exactly the same MOO. And we are both running it and then send each other messages on status updates. Okay, you might be thinking this is kind of a weird way of doing things, and I absolutely 100% agree with you. Also, because we're writing code for each other to run, and Super Collider is not sandboxed, this requires a massive amount of trust. So wave the magic wand could say delete your hard drive. There are a few easy things in place to not do that, and I trust Shelley not to delete my hard drive. But this is not a sandbox environment, so there's a high amount of trust required. You know, bugs are okay as long as they don't do data loss, like serious data loss. Oh gosh, we're zipping through. Um, so the object storage is the MOO database is a giant JSON file, which Shelley generated. And so when I log in, I open the JSON file, and then I use the server to find Shelley or whoever else is on, and we're both dealing with that. We could actually, if the firewall were open and we both were willing to spend some time debugging OSC messages, which is the messaging protocol used by Super Collider, we could just run it between ourselves without a server. It could be really possibly peer-to-peer. Okay, am I going to talk about the server? Yeah, why not? So OSC messaging is made up of OSC stands for Open Sound Control, and it's a really, really common protocol used by music languages. And it's sort of a replacement for MIDI, but not quite. But it's really hard to send UDP messages through a firewall, so it's like a pain in the bum, even on a local area network sometimes. So I came up with the solution, which is to use WebSockets to sort of emulate UDP messages. You can tell me all the reasons this is a terrible idea. So SCMOO server, which you don't need to run SCMOO, is just a Node.js server, which sends out the JSON file and doesn't store any changes to it yet, and runs a WebSocket, and that's it. And Super Collider, somebody had the idea of embedding a web browser in it, which is a slightly mad thing to do, but I guess it was popular for a while. And you can get it to trigger a Super Collider function if the console in the web browser gets a message. It's a bit of a bodge. So the browser in Super Collider loads a web page which has a JavaScript in it, which opens a socket connection. And then Super Collider passes messages to one of the JavaScript functions to send it out. The server takes it, echoes it to all users. Next slide. When the message arrives, it triggers something which outputs a message to a console and then adds it to a queue. And then Super Collider says, oh, there's something in the queue, and goes and reads it. And just because there might be some errors in this process, it checks if there's anything else in the queue. And this creates an error message that pops up in the log when you're running it that I cannot get rid of, and it's in bright red. So if you ever perform with this, people will say, oh my God, you had so many errors. Actually, the errors are supposed to be there. It's just very difficult to get rid of them. Okay, object storage. It's a JSON file, which can be, oh, I said it already. So the upcoming plans for this are to write a proper database. If you go find the SCMOO on Git, no, it's not on GitHub anymore, I just moved it, on Codeberg, you will find part of a SQL schema for a database. I realized this morning there's a mistake in it, so don't install the database yet, but it's not using it anyway. It will be soon. This would preserve state on logout, and it would solve some extra bugs where if, like, Shelley creates a pet cat when I'm not logged in and I log in later, I can't see her cat. It's very sad. And then the cat disappears forever when she logs out. I mean, you don't want this to happen to your pets, right? So there are ways to export it, and that could become part of, anyway. And there is an argument to be made that this should not be peer-to-peer, and that the MOO part should actually run more on the server and be a centralized thing. This loses some of the absolute weirdness of the project, and it's kind of normal and boring. And it also has its downsides because all of these objects that we're making have the ability to create sound. You create an object like a cat, and it has a description. Maybe it has a verb on it that says pet. But what the pet can do, because we're in a music language, is it can start synthesizing something that sounds like cat purring. And that's really interesting. But maybe that's relying on some parameters of like how happy the cat is feeling because it has an internal state. So if the cat's grumpy, it doesn't purr, it hisses. So you need to be able to read the parameter before you synthesize the sound. So there is some issue with like making sure everything is synchronized across everything, which anyway, we all know how that's hard. We're now going to swap to a demo, which means I need to swap over computers. Can you hold this? We're gonna be super lo-fi here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the server's up. If the server is, oh, this is really lo-fi, moo.blessing.exchange. I had the idea for a cryptocurrency based on saying bless you when people sneezes, and I never made it. But I still have the URL, so this is moo.blessing.exchange. Let's make this a little smaller. Okay, it says what Moo is. Okay, if you see this web page, it's up, and it tells you what you need to download. So let's just reload this and make sure that it hasn't crashed. Good. It does occasionally crash. Okay, this is our super collider window. That first line, which is commented out, is what you would write to install it. This is also documented on the web page that we just looked at. And then there's this nice help file that I've got open called Moo Login, which tells you how to log in. Currently, the Moo does not save some audio stuff, so which it will do, but right now that's all documented in this help file. So you just open it, read it, and then run the script, and it does all the audio stuff for you. So the first thing I need to do is save my name in variable A. And run all of this. And something happens. Yay. Okay, the text is really big. But okay, so you're sitting in a room different than the one from a moment ago. Alvin Lucier jokes. You start out in the lobby. We can do stuff like we can read the flyer. Oh, no, you can't read the flyer. Let's look at the flyer. Okay, cool. We support this. And then where did it say we can go? We can go north. Okay, and we find ourselves in another room. So it's named the bar. We see a description of it, and then we see a list of all the objects. If Shelly was logged in, it would also say, you see Shelly is here at the top of the thing. So there's all sorts of stuff we can interact with here. I think the dog makes noise. What do I do with it? Should I pet the dog? What should I do with the dog? Yeah, so like these sounds aren't very exciting yet, but there's also all the affordances of Super Collider, and that's what's going on the right here, where it says code spaces. You can be live coding normal live code stuff there, and we can add sounds and stuff to objects. One of the things on the roadmap is to add a clock object to this so that to make sure things can sync properly. If you happen to log in, and Shelly designed all of this, there's a bunch more rooms. There's you can go fishing for bass, you catch a bass guitar. It's puns galore. I think we're basically out of time. So does anyone have any quick questions? Yeah. That would be super neat if the Noodle people wanted to show up. They're really, really invested in a language called Strudel, and I can't currently support that. But again, if this stuff moves away from running all on Super Collider and moves towards a web server, then that's an obvious possibility of incorporating that. Okay, thank you.